I submit to you that Dr. Spock is the father of the feel-good kids movement. Feel-good kids movement. Dr. Spock, Benjamin Spock, was born, and by the way, some of you are thinking, Dr. Spock, was he from Star Trek? No. Before there was Spock on Star Trek, there was Dr. Benjamin Spock from Connecticut, born in 1903, who received his medical degree in 1929 from Columbia, and then he went and trained for 6 years at the New York Psychoanalytic Institute. He practiced pediatrics in New York City while teaching the subject at Cornell University Medical College from 1933 to 1947. And as he observed children under his pediatric care, he decided to one day sit down and write a book. And the book was called The Common Book of Baby and Child Care. It became a bestseller, topping out at 50 million copies sold by the time of Spock's death, with several rewrites and republishings along the way. He died in 1998, and the story of his life is what we're going to give you here on The Deep End, because you need to know where we come from, and you need to know how his voice shaped your reality, whether or not you believe it. It is true. It has shaped your reality. Spock wrote this book to counteract the rigid pediatric doctrines of his day, which emphasized things like strict feeding schedules for infants and discouraged open displays of affection between parent and child. And there were doctors that came before him that advocated for that kind of parenting. And so he came and kind of reactionarily reacted to that, far extreme, and brought it all the way over to the other extreme. So the Book of Common, the Common Book of Baby and Child Care, first line of the book, quote, "Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do." Man, if there is ever a appealing sentiment to 21st century America in the 20th century of America, I cannot think of a better line. Trust yourself is all about what you feel, what you think you can do. And you got to know that you got what it takes, right? And then he later admitted that his book was not based on scientific experiment or tests with children and parents, but really just came out of his own head. Literally, a quote from him, the book really came out of my own head. The book stressed the importance of listening to children and appreciating their individual differences, and encouraged parents to raise each child as an individual. He has a whole chapter called The 1-Year-Old, in which he encourages parents to rearrange the furniture of their house for the child that's prone to, quote, wander and explore. So here it is, the parents have to rearrange their home for the kid who wants to go and do things that he probably shouldn't do, touch things he probably shouldn't touch. And rather than restrict the child, he taught, no, ease up and reshape your whole house for the sake of the child. By the way, he also advocated for prone sleeping. That is putting the baby on their stomach to sleep. The widespread belief was that if you put them on their back, they will vomit in their mouth and choke and die. No, the actual opposite is true. If you put them on their stomach, they will suffocate. And it led to a SIDS outbreak, sudden infantile death syndrome outbreak in America. Cost many Americans and Europeans their children's lives. And then he also believed, and this is not on the screen, but he also believed that circumcision, a very biblical value, was traumatic for males. Now, I say biblical value. I know it's Old Covenant. It's not necessarily the New Covenant, but there are arguments about whether it's good or bad have been going back and forth over the course of human history. I go with the Bible. If God told Abraham to circumcise a child, man, maybe it might have some health benefits. Anyway, by the way, there's also a whole host of scientific studies about how the amount of coagulant in the blood spikes on the 8th day of the child's life, which lends to the circumcision healing at the precise time that you actually did it, because God told Abraham to circumcise his child on the 8th day, and every Jew since has done that. But nonetheless, let's get back to Dr. Spock. Some other important facts about Dr. Spock that you might need to know. His first wife became a paranoid schizophrenic. She actually helped him write the book. She eventually had a nervous breakdown. She was hospitalized for 6 months, and then she was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. He became famous. She became a mad housewife. This is from someone reporting. She became addicted to alcohol and tranquilizers, and then prone to denouncing her husband at parties, viciously, like making fun of him in front of other people. So they did not exactly have the perfect marriage. In fact, he divorced and later married a woman 41 years younger than him. Okay, I think he was like 73 and she was 32, like 41 years younger. Their 2 sons suffered as a result of their behavior and their actual lifestyle. John, his son, later denounced his father, told the world that his father made him feel judged, criticized, scared, beaten down. Now, politically, Dr. Benjamin Spock's views matter as well. He protested the Vietnam War. That's not really the big thing, but he was tried and convicted. It was later overturned for counseling draft evasions during the Vietnam War. And then in 1972, Spock ran for election as president for the People's Party. This is a socialist party whose platform included free medical care, a guaranteed minimum wage. So Yang Gang, think Yang Gang there. The decriminalization of abortion, homosexuality, and marijuana. So you could say that he was way ahead of the curve of the social trajectory of America back in 1972. I mean, they didn't even have a prayer against Richard Nixon in 1972. He won in a landslide, but nonetheless, that was his philosophy, his political leanings. And that, by the way, that tells you a lot. That tells you all you need to know. Anyone, listen to me, anyone who believes that everyone should get something for nothing is lying. They're lying on two accounts. Number one, nothing is really free. Someone's always paying for it. But number two, it's a danger to society because good societies are built on, dare to think, personal responsibility. A direct quote from his 73-year-old self. He said this when he was 73. Okay, imagine your 73-year-old grandpa saying this. Quote, "I love to dance in order to liberate myself from my puritanical upbringing." Okay, if you're 73 years old and you're still thinking about that stuff, you got some hang-ups up in your head. Interesting childhood story from Dr. Spock. His own mother's choice of punishment was to put the child in a dark closet. That is unthinkable, honestly. One time she forgot one of her kids in the closet and went away to New York. They lived in New Haven, Connecticut, mind you. Spock wanted to see this kind of punishment stopped. Nevertheless, Spock's influence on American families was profound. Again, his book became a bestseller. It sold like 750,000 copies every year for like several years in a row. He actually became afraid that all of the publicity would eventually lead to lawsuits if his parenting advice did not lead to the success that parents expected. But Look magazine in 1959 said perhaps no other person has so influenced an entire nation's ideas about babies. His views have brought naturalness, common sense, reassurance, Sigmund Freud, good Lord, and even joy to parents all over the world. That's 1959, a very popular magazine called Look magazine. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, always be aware of who the world is praising in the moment. Like, always be aware of who the world is praising in the moment. You've got to be careful of who the world is praising in the moment that they are praising him. If you're listening only, it's because I'm putting somebody on the screen that you need to be aware of, that the world is praising in the moment, and the future will determine whether that person provided good or evil for society. Like we judge presidents so wrongly in this country. We judge political leaders so wrongly. Like, we can judge their views, but their contribution can only be judged over the course of human history following them. Like, who is really right? Woodrow Wilson was a very popular president at his time, but the argument could be made that he reshaped the federal government in ways that are unhealthy to this day. You could make the argument that maybe FDR winning the third term was not the best option for America going forward. So we tend to think, president's doing what I like. He's giving me free money. He's handing me things right now. He's what our president is doing. He's selling our strategic oil reserve to China for money, and he's also dwindling our strategic oil reserve so that gas prices have come down 80 cents, and everybody thinks, oh, good job. But the future, okay, we're constantly in the moment people, and the future always determines the legacy of the contributions of the individual. And Dr. Spock, history is not so kind to his views. He got crazy toward the end of his life. He remarried, like I said, a woman 41 years his younger, and she was a cray-cray. I'm telling you. She led him into this weird dieting habit, and it actually ended up influencing future rewrites of his book on parenting. An article from the Chicago Tribune, 1998, details Spock's counsel for parents concerning extreme dietary guidance. The article is Dr. Spock's Irresponsible Legacy, written by Joan Beck. He wrote in a later edition of his book, "I no longer recommend dairy products after the age of 2. Other calcium sources offer many advantages that dairy products do not have." He also said that children should not be permitted to have coffee, which I agree with, tea, Coca-Cola, which is fine, but also no chocolate. No chocolate for a kid? Like, what kind of a monster? Anyway, the book recommends substituting teas made from grains or herbs, fruit juice, and soy and rice milk products instead of milk. Hello, my goodness, this guy was way ahead of the time. It's like he had a crystal ball and he could see where the country was going, and he held those views back when they weren't popular, but his views have reshaped us in ways that have been detrimental to us. We'll get to that in just a moment. But, quote, he wrote, children can get plenty of protein from beans, grains, and vegetables, and when they do, they avoid the animal fat and cholesterol found in meats. Again, these are later additions, but where did they come from? What happened that made Spock suddenly change his views on how to feed children? Well, again, when you marry somebody that's 4 decades younger than you, she can have a hold on you. So this article says, unfortunately, Spock's book is vague about the scientific backing. Once again, no scientific research for what he pronounces. So vague about the scientific backing for his radical advice to parents about their children's nutrition, although it's easy to find enthusiastic vegetarians. It is true that many American children tend to eat too much fat and sugar, and that meat and eggs can contribute to high cholesterol. But the New Age enthusiasms of Spock's second wife, Mary, whom he married when he was 73 and she was 32, may have been a determining factor in why the book was changed. Mary, his second wife, led Spock, a prominent Vietnam War protester and leftist political activist, in a New Age direction, and the two of them, listen to this, practiced Kundalini yoga, Sanskrit chanting, meditation, shiatsu, massage, and macrobiotic cooking. Quote, slowly, Spock relinquished control of his life to Mary to preserve her husband's health. Mary supervised virtually every move and arranged for macrobiotic foods to be shipped to them no matter where they went. And then Spock also endured a lot of blame for the post-1960s America. Remember, he wrote his book in 1946. So the children that were raised in the 1940s and 1950s became the teens of the 1960s, and the 1960s was filled with an entire generation of youth with no restraint and rebellion that seemingly came out of nowhere. This garnered Dr. Benjamin Spock a ton of Jerry Falwell sort of critiques. Jerry Falwell, wearing my Liberty shirt today because I just dropped my child off there. But anyway, articles like this one from a retired pastor, professional counselor, and talk show host named Reb Bradley pins all the failures of the last century on Dr. Benjamin Spock. The title of the article is How Dr. Spock is Destroying America. Now, these are the points that Reb Bradley makes. Like, since 1960, the rate of violent crime has more than tripled. Because, again, when you give kids no restraints, they tend to follow through on no restraints. 1 out of every 4 teenage girls now has a sexually transmitted disease. In fact, the last 5 decades has seen the number of distinct STDs rise from 5 to more than 50. And then Spock admitted to the New York Times the first edition of his child-rearing book had contributed to an increase of permissive parenting in America. He said, quote, parents began to be afraid to impose on the child in any way, end quote. This led to a rewrite in 1957, which really did not have the same impact as the original copy of the book. Back to Reb Bradley, he says, instead of stressing the importance of teaching self-denial and respect for authority, Spock emphasized accommodating children's feelings and catering to their preferences. And this is not on the screen, but he writes, no longer did children learn that they could endure Brussels sprouts and suffer through daily chores. Using Spock's approach, parents began to feed self-indulgence instead of instilling self-control. Homes were becoming less parent-directed and more child-centered as parents elevated children's freedom of expression and natural cravings. Children became more outspoken, defiant, and demanding of gratification. In fact, they came to view the gratification as a right. Man, this, by the way, this article was written in 2010. Kind of spot on. In a New York Times interview, Spock said that he would be proud of his book leading to the idealism and militancy of youth today. But look at this last one here. Is it any surprise that Spock participated with teenagers in protests and was arrested multiple times in the 1960s because of his contempt for governmental authority? And was it any more of a surprise when he entered the 1972 presidential race as a candidate for the Socialist People's Party? His political actions revealed the underlying philosophy of his book. Now, this is a mouthful, but it's true that this guy literally did reshape a generation and marched lockstep with them. Again, back to the New York Times article. This article saying Dr. Spock as a father, no Molly Coddler. Back in 1968, this article came out, and it says this: what does Dr. Spock think of young people today? Quote, I would be very proud, or I'd be proud if the idealism and militancy of youth today were caused by my book, end quote. I'd be delighted, end quote. So he watches his book take a hold of an entire generation of rebellious youth, and he's like, yeah, that's great. They hate the Vietnam War. I hate the Vietnam War. They hate authority. Well, I hated my mom's authority. And then later on in life, we change. And again, don't judge somebody's legacy by what's going on in their life right now. Even he himself despaired of what America had become. I bring you this 1994 Newsweek article, quote, Dr. Spock in despair. This is 4 years before his death. And the book says, in his new book, A Better World for Our Children, it is Jerry-made, albeit one written in Spock's characteristic tone of understated reasonableness. The very generation raised by his precepts has let Dr. Spock down. Sexual openness has led to casual divorce and the coarsening of popular culture. Gender equality has meant that women compete for career advancement as ferociously as men, so that neither parent has time for the children who spend all day watching TV and getting fat. Men don't wear neckties to the office. When I look at our society and I think of the millions of children exposed every day to its harmful effects, I am near despair, he writes. Yeah. So, Dr. Benjamin Spock, I am not going to tell you that he is the only reason for why today's universities are undermining, and high schools, by the way, are undermining parental authority, but I can offer you the hypothesis that he had a huge part in it. He reshaped America as he knew it. And again, you have to think about this. Why did he come to these weird and crazy, far over here conclusions on how to parent, like leniency, reshaping the house for the sake of the wandering child, making sure that you let them eat whenever they want to, and if they whatever they want to cater to it, because each child is an individual. Well, he only got to that end of the spectrum. Think about this, because he was raised in a generation where it was way over here on the stilted, very hierarchical, controlling spectrum as a parent. So his philosophy in large part was reactionary to where he came from. And I had this thought, again, back to whose voice should we be listening to? My thoughts as a pastor is simply this. Everyone telling you something is a failed sinner with a sin-tainted mind, influenced by scores of other failed sinners with sin-tainted minds. Whoever you're listening to, do you understand that they are a sinner? Do you understand that the reason why they believe what they believe is because other sinners influence them? You have to think about it. It's a big philosophical pie to start digging into in your own mind. And it should lead us to this very important question. Who do you listen to first? Because I don't know about you, but I want my life to be successful. I want my children to be successful. I want my wife to be successful. And so the question is not, what cultural mantras am I embracing from my life right now? The question is, do I discern those voices through the lens of a higher authority? And if only we could find a higher authority that is bigger and higher than human beings, where could we go for that higher authority? Oh, that's right, the Bible. That's right. Cursed is the man who trusted man, right? But blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, Jeremiah 17. And I thought about this for you. Here's what Psalms 128 says. Listen to this verse. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord. Listen to that. You have a respect for the Lord. And then you walk in his ways. Your view of God will determine the life that you lead. And then he says this. If you listen to the Lord and you fear the Lord, it says this. You shall eat the fruit of your labor. You shall be blessed. It shall be well with you. Verse 3, your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. And here's the fundamental fact. Here's the fundamental philosophy. You listen to whoever you fear. You listen, and this is a fact for you, whether you believe it or not, you've got to receive it. You're listening right now to whoever you fear. The question is, who do you fear? And what I mean by fear is that you really put a lot of weight into that person's opinion. You put a lot of stock into what they say, whatever that group of they is for you. If it is a certain book, then you're going to fear that book and you're going to follow that book. Or if it's a neighbor, if it's a friend, or if it's a philosophy, or maybe like Dr. Spock, it's a reactionary kind of go all the way over to the other end of the spectrum, because I don't want to be associated with those people who hurt me. So I want to go all the way over here to those people, to this side where I'm sure they don't get hurt. But then what does life show you? But that people are flawed no matter where you go. People are flawed no matter where you go. So my question is this. What voice do you fear in your life? Like the university voice says, listen to us, we are educated. The media voice says, listen to us, we are informed. The neighbor says, listen to us. We have this experience. And the entertainment voice says, listen to us. We are beautiful. You know, someday, very soon, I am going to do a whole segment on how entertainment shaped America. Like we're doing how Dr. Spock shaped America, but soon I am going to do a how entertainment shaped America.